when we talk about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, what are we talking about? We're talking about points, rules, rounds, time limits, advantages, stalling, referees, competition, sanitized sport. That's what we're talking about. That is the sport of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. When we're talking about Gracie Jiu Jitsu, we're talking about a mindset. We're talking about street self-defense. We're talking about a weapons awareness. We're talking about handling real life situations, no rounds, no rules, no referees, a cold, dark night in an alleyway when someone accosts you and you have no option but to fight. We're talking about when someone comes up to your girlfriend in the club and grabs her behind. We're talking about all of those things. What we're not doing is saying one is better than the other, because we can't do that. Just like judo came from us, from jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a sportive derivative of the traditional fighting system of Japanese jiu-jitsu. Japanese jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You tell me the differences. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Are they different? Yes, they are different. It's completely different. You know, people say, "Oh, it's the same thing." No way is it the same thing. I can put a few clips up on my Instagram and we can compare and we can see how different they are.
Right. Okay.
The technical fundamentals, they're the same. So a kimura will always be a kimura. A rear naked choke will always be a rear naked choke. You know, those things, an arm lock, you know, those things are paramount. The difference is the mindset behind them, the entries and exits to those positions, and the complete awareness of where we are. Like, would you jump guard in the street on the pavement on somebody? No, because
probably not.
There's
no.
I hope not, because there's a potential risk that you're going to get slammed. He may produce a weapon at that point. He may have friends with him. And the last place you want to be is on the bottom with your legs wrapped around him when he has 2 or 3 friends with him. Now, I'm not saying as a Gracie Jiu Jitsu exponent that we can deal with multiple attackers. Anyone who tells you that is talking complete nonsense. They are talking stupidity, because even one person is a risk. 2 people is going to be a beatdown, you know, or worse. And 3 people, maybe one with a weapon, it's a wrap. So we're not saying that at all. What we're saying is very simple. If we process everything for the street, so what do we look at? We look at three A's. We look at awareness, you know, what is going on here? Then we have our assessment protocols, and then we have our action. What is our action? Our action could be we run away. Hey, I got home safely. That's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? That's martial arts.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right? Non-engagement of combat is a big one for us. The longer we're in a fight outside, the higher the probability of injury, serious injury or death. So we try to avoid at all times. That said, the ground with someone, because remember, we're talking about martial art, not a sport. When you talk to me about jiu-jitsu, I'm talking to you about a martial art, not a sport. When you talk to most other instructors, they're talking to you about a sport. And that's the difference.
So the difference is that Gracie Jiu Jitsu is something that you embody, something that becomes a part of you. It's part of your mindset. Let
me make it clearer. Let me make it much clearer. How many components are there to jiu-jitsu? We say there are 5 components. And listen very carefully to the components that I'm going to tell you. Striking, clinching, takedowns, throwing, and finally ground grappling. The 6th component is the weapons awareness. Component number 7, which governs the whole thing, is the mindset. Then beyond that, we talk about self-defense right now. We have health defense, what we eat, what we process and think, what we outwardly portray, how we're not manic depressives. So there's a whole thing that goes with Gracie Jiu Jitsu, which other Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, our cousins in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu don't have. And that's not saying they're any less than us. That's not saying that at all. We're on actually equal pars. The difference is our priority is preparing for a real life combat situation, and their priority is winning points and advantages in competitions.
Right.
That's the major difference.
You're saying about it in a street fight, and this is something I found quite interesting. You wouldn't go up to guard. You would never go for guard if it was just, you know,
listen,
one-on-one.
I may have to go to guard in the street fight to protect myself. That may have to happen. If someone manages to wail on top of me, I may have to do that. But ultimately, I want to be in a top position. I want to be knee on stomach. I want to be able to not only engage, but disengage if I have to. I want to be able to make sure my peripheral surroundings are good. I want to make sure I'm watching out for weapons and other people coming over and intervening. And I want to make sure that I can make good an escape at any moment, not just clinch someone and then they hold on to me and I can't escape. Because if you go back to UFC 1, 2, and 3, when the world started to see Gracie Jiu Jitsu and we see Royce, what did we see Royce doing? We saw Royce using the pisau, the side kick. We saw Royce using punches in the face, elbows.
Yeah. Right.
We saw punching in the groin, knee in the groin. We saw him using spike elbows from inside the closed guard. We saw him palm swap, right? We saw all of that. And that is nothing to do with the sportive element of jiu-jitsu now. I've gone to train with people, friends of mine, and they said, oh, Ed, listen, here, don't hit no one. Don't, take no one's fingers off. Don't put fingers in. Don't do all of this stuff. And I say, man, listen, you think we don't spar like you guys in our academy? It's to do with how we function in the mindset and how we understand the use of distance, how we understand distance management, how we understand that feeling of being safe. And remember, this isn't just being taught in our academies. It's also, I'm bringing real life information from my background as an SO19 firearms officer, as a police officer that saw live combat every day on the streets. I'm bringing that to the equation too, from a very reliable place. And I'm not the only one. There are many people out there doing this.
Do you start off teaching people Gracie Jiu Jitsu first?
Nothing we teach is not Gracie Jiu Jitsu.
Right.
Look at the smile on my face. Nothing we teach is not Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We elaborate very carefully. This is for the pavement arena. You could do this here. You should be thinking about this. You should be advocating that. But if you're sparring in the academy with your friends, perhaps you want to think about this. You've seen in our training, the way we train with gloves sometimes. You've seen this, Why? Because we want to be punch-proof. We want to be bulletproof in the street. I don't want to be reaching my hand inside someone's jacket or jumper while they're punching me in the nose. I don't want to be doing that.
Right.
There are very clear differences here between Gracie Jiu Jitsu for self-defense and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Now, remember, my teacher, Royler Gracie, is one of the most formidable, decorated sports champions the world has ever seen. Look at his brother, Rickson Gracie. Is he known more for sport competition or Vale-Tudo fights?
Yeah, true.
Vale-Tudo fights.
Yeah.
Right? So that side will focus on that. And Renzo's a dear friend of mine. I love Renzo. I love him to bits. He's a great guy. I know Renzo, I know Half, I know Hyan. From the other side of the family, they are true advocates of Gracie Jiu Jitsu. Roger Gracie's father, Maurizio Gomez, is a true advocate of Gracie Jiu Jitsu. He's a Polish Gracie black belt. Red master. He's a master now, but he received his black belt from Polish Gracie. That will show you how the family is, how it was originally. Remember, we didn't grow in jiu-jitsu through points, regulations, rules, and we came from the streets, fight. Not us, but those before us were fighting to prove the effectiveness and efficiency of jiu-jitsu prior to the UFC.
So it would be beneficial for people to deal with the striking as well, as just doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, where it's pretty much just check techniques and submissions, right?
How do you think fights in the street happen?
Well, exactly, man. Yeah,
Right.
There's going to be punches, there's going to be kicks. You need to
Right.
know how to defend them, right?
How many times, in complete honesty, let's be honest and open, and this is not
honest, man,
disrespectful to anyone, okay? So anyone listening, this is not in any disrespectful way. This is our own concepts and principles, and I'm trying to portray a message to you guys to give you something to think about, some food for thought. How many times have you practiced escaping headlock?
Not very often. Not very often.
And how often have you practiced then? How many times? That's the staple diet. That's the fundamental diet of the sportive side of jiu-jitsu. We practice that stuff I just mentioned to you daily. It's a daily occurrence for us.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
If that is not your primary objective, to learn how to defend yourself from an effective martial art, you know, like using martial arts effectively in the street, then you can't say you're training self-defense.
For sure.
You can't say that, right? And we can't say we're training sport jiu-jitsu. That said, we have world IBJJF champions in our association, Naga champions, Bellator fight. You know, we have all these guys. But our primary objective is self-defense.
Got you. So,
and that leads nicely into the next thing. We have a curriculum-based training. So we have curriculum-based training, so our students can gauge where they are all of the time.
Yes.
White to blue, blue to purple.
Yeah.
Right, but it's all self-defense. We don't test our students on their ability to fight and win medals. I don't promote my students, and I'll give you a really good example in a second on winning medals. I promote my students on teaching ability. Each one of my students, even at white belt, we're looking at teaching them. We're looking at them becoming teachers. So they're teachers first and foremost. Secondary, we're testing their knowledge on the self-defense curriculum. Because when they're black belts and they're 60, 70, 80 years old, you cannot go onto the mat and roll around like we do now, right? But what they can do is have a program which allows them to train forever. The last lesson I took from Grandmaster Elio Gracie was self-defense. And let me just correct someone. The remainder of the lessons I would take from him and his sons in Brazil were all self-defense orientated. The whole lesson isn't self-defense, but there's a huge focus on self-defense when we're rolling. So for example, when we're sparring and rolling, I'm thinking in my head, I need to block these arms in case he punches me. I need to watch where his teeth are. I need to watch where his head is. Where's my head in comparison to his? Could I use my elbow here? You know, could I need a guy in the head? Now, I'm not saying that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys that enter MMA fights don't do well. Look at Paulo Costa the weekend. Black belt in Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Right.
Do you understand where I'm coming from? This is why
it's having that awareness, man. Like,
it's that mindset, and it's the understanding that there is much more to jiu-jitsu than rolling on the ground, than taking someone down. Because theoretically, we're like judo, that our sportive family, because I still see them as part of the same unit. They're like judo. They just have takedowns and more intricate submissions, and they can roll on the ground a lot longer than the judo guys can.
I think it's important actually to understand, especially as I can see from a beginner's point of view, to actually understand where you're heading. It's like you're saying, instead of just rolling and grappling and sparring, that you need to have an understanding of you've got ability to punch me here. You know, I mean, side control. You have the ability to punch me in the face there. But when you're a beginner, you don't think about that. No, I think from day one.
It's only because the instructor's not advocating that. We don't punch each other in the face, of course. I mean, sometimes we do, and that's fun too. But I mean, you know, if you're in a fight outside and you grapple with the guy and you say to the guy, okay, do you give up? And the guy's like, yeah, I'll give up. You let him go, the guy gets up and fights again.
Fight, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, all of this needs, so don't lie to your students. Be honest and tell them, look, this is a sport. What we're teaching here is a sport. If you want to learn, and that's why we consider ourselves traditional Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We label it very clearly. People come to my academy and I ask them a set of questions. Are you looking to compete? Are you looking to do this? Are you looking? That's not what we do here. And I'll direct them to somewhere where I think, you know, they'll be better suited.
Right, got you.
There's a reason and because we're on it, remember, it goes back to being honest and transparent. And it's not about we're better and bigger than anyone else, because we're not, we're really not. Our message is just more potent than most. That's the only difference. We're giving a very real message out there. And, you know, we're not saying they can't do well in competitions and they can't fight. That's great. But what we're saying is, if your primary objective is winning medals, you're never going to be prepared completely for the street.